The left in America are no longer Americans, and they need to be treated as ideological enemies. I'm Chuck Mason, and welcome back to the show. Yes, I said it, and you heard that right. The American left are no longer Americans, even though they were born here on American soil, and they become enemies of the state. Now, those are really strong words, but let me walk you down through this and explain exactly why. America was founded as a nation basically on three fundamental key ideas and principles in its foundation that gave its identity. And that was freedom, particularly the freedom of the individual to be able to determine the outcome of their lives. It's something we call individualism. And the moral guidance of the Judeo-Christian worldview. We're not just talking about things like sexual morality or marriage, or this goes fundamentally to the depths of what we understand to be human identity and human value in terms of fundamental human rights that are, without a doubt, what we understand in the West to be a uniquely Judeo-Christian influenced concept. America maintained its identity and its success for generations because it held tightly to a worldview built upon these fundamental ideas, that they were the most important things that humanity could experience and that they needed to be preserved and protected at all costs, not only here at home, but also throughout the world. But starting in the early 1900s, Marxism, critical theory, postmodern thought, and process theology all entered into our institutions in various forms. Remained very much hidden. We knew it was there, but its influence began to slowly chip away and to deconstruct America's foundations of freedom, individualism, and a Judeo-Christian foundation. For the most part, Americans went about their daily lives not thinking that the attacks on America that were happening in its universities, these simple ideas, would ever have any kind of a profound effect in any way, shape, or form. But after generations of young people went to universities, after generations of this message resonating throughout pop culture, particularly starting in the 1960s, for a generation that wanted to move away from a Christian foundation and wanted the promise of equality and freedom for lifestyle and lifestyle choices, it had its effect. So today, American leftists, or I should say leftists in America, no longer hold to this concept of freedom, freedom of the individual, and a Judeo-Christian worldview as a foundation for American life. They are, in fact, embracing equity. They're embracing collectivism. And today, Marxism and the Marxist paradigm have become the moral foundation of the left. And they're not content to simply cohabitate in America with a different point of view. They want to simply deconstruct and destroy traditional America because they believe the narratives that came from Marxism and particularly critical theory and postmodernity, that individualism in American life and life in the West and capitalism and Christianity were in fact oppressive, exploitative narratives that ultimately caused genocide. That might be hard for you to believe, believing this, but if you've ever sat through these in a college classroom or spent any time studying these philosophical positions, this is exactly what they teach. So today our country is ideologically divided, irreparably so. We have two equally opposing and opposite worldviews vying for control in America. And the American left now have a worldview and a vision for life and a moral framework that is absolutely moral antimatter and intellectual antimatter to everything that the nation was ever founded upon. Rather than individualism, where an individual can determine the outcome of their lives and their levels of success based upon merit, the nation now, on the left, wants equity. Equity is simply comprehensive equality that's determined to eliminate differences in outcomes that come through merit. They're collectivists. Rather than seeing the individual's right, your right to determine the outcome of your life and having the freedom to do that, they're collectivists. Collectivism says that we must surrender our individual rights and individual success and surrender whatever gain we might have had and contribute it to the collective of society, where the elites will distribute those resources to receive equality across every level of outcome for everybody across the nation. And in order to do that, you must surrender your individual rights and your individual identity. And finally, they're Marxist, and this is the reason behind all of this. The Marxist and critical theory paradigm says that the differences in outcomes, the inequalities, cause forms of oppression, exploitation, and ultimately genocide. If you work hard as an individual and you gain a certain level of success and an excess of resources that you store away in a bank account, or you choose to build a bigger home, or you choose to send your kids to a better school, what the theory says is that your pursuit of individual excellence or individual success happens at the expense of somebody else in society. You've placed your self-interest over the interest of others and the interest of the collective good of the people. And in doing so, you've got resources that are locked away in your bank account or locked away in your car or locked away in your jewelry. And had they been distributed to the poor, had they been distributed to people with less resources or less opportunity, you could have pulled them out of poverty. Somebody who needed health care who couldn't get it would get the health care had you distributed your resources. But because you didn't, and they didn't get the health care and they died, that is a form of genocide. This is the fundamental push for equity. It's the Marxist endgame that's simply been rebranded with this sensibility of comprehensive equality within our contemporary leftist mantra. If you want to know how serious this is, if you happen to ever go to whitehouse.gov, which is the website that every president gets to tailor to their own needs, the Biden White House listed the pursuit of equity, that they wanted to make the mission of the federal government to achieve every level of equity, comprehensive equality across every major sector of society that the federal government could achieve and enact. The left have departed. Not only have they left what was America's foundings, they are hell-bent on destroying every aspect of what America was to bring forth essentially a Marxist, critical theorist, post-Christian vision. If you think I'm crazy, I want to ask you, did you see what happened with the transgender protection in women's sports legislation that went through the House and got stopped in the Senate? This is part of what postmodernity and critical theory says. That gender is no longer biological, and that this concept of facts are only myths, perspectives. There are no facts. There is no biology. Human beings and their identities are social constructs. They're created by society. So gender can be whatever society creates and adopts, and people choose based upon their feelings and their emotions. So for them, in reordering America, this concept of post-truth social conditioning must be enforced at every level. But given Trump's victory and wanting to pass legislation to protect women from the incursion of men into their private and public spaces and protect them physically from getting pummeled in women's sports, when this came through the House of Representatives, every Democratic representative in the House, except 3 who reside in Texas, voted against the bill. When it made it to the Senate, Senate Democrats walked in lockstep to kill the bill and not even allow it to come up for a vote. Do you think they're Americans? They're not. Doesn't mean that you're American, that you were born on American soil. What it means to be American is that you hold to the foundational concepts that gave America its vision that has led to your success and the opportunity for your success. But the American left no longer believes in that. They believe that America is a genocidal, oppressive, exploitative nation that must be deconstructed and reconstructed. And there's no going back. If you're concerned about America, it's time to stop thinking about that we're all working from the same fundamental principles that guide us to believing and understanding and knowing what it means to be an American in our nation. The nation's divided. There are two irreconcilable visions fighting for control. And until we come to terms with that, and until we're ready to work on those levels, the division that we see and the social decay that we experience are going to continue. I'm Chuck Mason. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, God bless.